Welcome to another episode of the Journey Podcast. The Journey Podcast is all about sharing the journeys of purpose-driven individuals from all walks of life who are following their passion and fulfilling their purpose in their own individual unique way. And I'm your host, Risa Kawamoto. In today's episode, I'm having a conversation with a dear friend of mine, J.W.Allen. John is an award-winning writer and copywriter. For his fictional writing, he writes under the pen name of J.W.Allen, and he recently won the QuaranCon Speculative Fiction Prize for his dystopian story, Show Me Your Resume. His stories have appeared in Simultaneous Times Podcast, Dark Matter magazine, Sci-Fi Lampoon, and more. But it wasn't always smooth sailing for John. He will be sharing how he got into writing and his struggle with his mental health along the way, and how he became a champion of promoting better mental health in society in his own unique way. I've known John for many years now, and his passion and determination has always been an inspiration to me, especially when I was starting out as a new yoga teacher and building my yoga and Ayurveda business whilst working in my day job. You will hear from him that he juggles writing with his other work, and he really made me feel that it's okay to follow my passion whilst keeping the day job. He will be sharing his top tips on how you can follow your own passion at the end of the episode, so do make sure to listen till the end. I hope you'll find his journey inspiring. So, hi John, welcome to the Journey Podcast. I am very I'm
Thanks
very
for having
excited. Yes, no, I'm very excited to have you. And yeah, I really can't wait to hear your inspiring journey. But yeah, firstly, how are you feeling today? And also, where in the world you are joining
Sure.
from?
So I'm feeling pretty tired today, but that's quite normal because I've been burning the candle trying to get a lot of stuff finished because I'm actually going on holiday at the end of the week. So this is a really nice way to sort of finish up the week, just sort of have someone chat to me. So I'm really looking forward to the holiday. So I'm okay, but I'll be glad for the rest.
All right, okay. Well, where are you off to?
Oh, I forgot to mention where I am in the world as well. So,
Yeah.
so I live in Essex. My wife and I moved here pre-COVID. So we now live in a little town called Leigh-on-Sea, which is 3 miles down the road from Southend-on-Sea, which most people know more about, usually for the wrong reasons. But where we live is actually very nice. And actually, Southend is also really nice. So I'm going to big it up for Southend to anyone who disses it, because it's actually a really nice place to live. But don't come and live here because we want to keep it nice.
I'm actually secretly quite envious because you live near the sea and I live in London, and yeah, I'm trying to convince my partner to let's move out of London. I want to live near the sea. Yeah, I'm really envious.
Yeah, that's okay. I get that a lot.
Cool. So first of all, I would love for you to share a little bit about your background
Sure.
and anything you would like to share about growing up and your early years as well.
Sure. I mean, we could be here for a very long time, so I'll try and keep it as brief as possible. Um, my background is I'm a semi-professional writer, fiction writer, and I'm a copywriter, editor, and content writer, and digital content manager. And in my experience, I've been a business manager. I used to work for Odeon Cinemas as a general manager. I've been an optician. I've worked in the mental health sector. I currently work in healthcare as well. I'm contracting for the NHS as we speak, amongst many other projects. Um, but writing is the core element of what I do and who I am. And I've been doing it professionally since 2011. So it's 11 years now I've been doing that. Um, Growing up, how did I get to where I am today? That's a messy story, but I think that's true of most people. So I suppose I come from a very typical middle class family. Uh, I was the middle child of three, and I don't know if you've ever heard of middle child syndrome, but I get,
Mm,
yeah, you have.
yes, yeah, kind of. Yeah.
Yeah, I get that a lot. Do you have a brother, don't you?
Yeah, I have a brother. I'm the youngest, so I'm the lucky one.
Yeah. I think I'm the unlucky one being the middle child in the family,
Yeah.
because I've got an older sister and I've got a younger brother. And growing up, the one thing that's really stuck in my head all the time is my parents are constantly saying to me, "Oh, thank God you were the break in between your sister and your brother." I was always told I was the quiet one. I was the one who didn't cause too many problems. And when I was younger, that's kind of cool to have your parent tell you. But then when you're a kid, I think you tend to live up to what you're learning and what your parents are telling you. So I kind of grew up with an expectation that, oh, I have to be quiet. I'm the calm one. I have to be calm because otherwise it's bad for other people. And I think I took that into school quite a bit. So believe it or not, people when they meet me think I'm a real extrovert and I'm happy to go in a room and talk to anyone who's there. And yes, I do that, but I've had to learn to do that because believe it or not, I'm actually quite introverted. I'm quite comfortable sitting in a room by myself, and enjoying my own company for a few hours. I also think there's a sort of not miscommunication, the word I'm looking for, there's a misunderstanding to what an introvert actually is. Introverts don't hate people. We love people. I love talking to
Mm,
people, but I'm very happy to do it on my own terms and in my own way. So I think growing up and my early years and the things that I was taught at school, particularly, and how to behave and how to act, definitely influenced me in my early years. And it taught me to be quiet. And it was only until I got to university, and my parents really encouraged me to apply and to go, which was great because I think that's really important for kids to have that kind of encouragement. It was only when I got to university that I started to come out of my shell a little bit, and actually sort of discover who I am and
mm,
find my own voice and start messing about and thinking about what I wanted to do in life. So I think, long story short, all those experiences have influenced me to where I am today. I didn't know if I wanted to be a writer when I was younger. I always wrote stories and I always enjoyed reading. And books were all over the house when I was growing up. I was very lucky, but I didn't know I wanted to do it. And in fact, there were many experiences I had at school which actively discouraged me from being creative and from pursuing writing passions. I went to, just full disclosure, I went to a Catholic school, which is, fine and it had good reputations, but I personally don't think religious schools are always the best way to go. I'm being very careful with what I say here because I know some people love them. But for me, I didn't think it was great because when I was probably in year eight, I'd always worked hard. I got that from my dad, work hard, work hard, work hard, and you can achieve lots of stuff. But I remember being told when I was 12 years old from a science teacher, "Oh, you're just not bright enough to be in this set at the moment, John. We need to downgrade you a set. You're just not bright enough." And that really stuck in my head. And
mm,
that stuck in my head for so many years that I think it actively held me back from pushing myself forward because when you're a child, you hear when people tell you stuff, you're like a sponge, or I felt I was a sponge, and even on a subconscious level, I didn't realize that that might have affected me. So over the next few years, like a typical teenager, I messed around a little bit, and I didn't try as hard as I think I could have. And as I've got older, I've actually gone the other way. So now I work ridiculously long hours sometimes to try and make up for the
mm,
ground that I lost when I was younger. Um, so I'm introverted, but I do like talking to people. I've had various mental health crises as I've grown up. I was diagnosed with general anxiety disorder a few years ago, which I thought was a made-up disease or just made-up nonsense. And I actually threatened to punch my counsellor when he told me I was really angry, but maybe he had a point because I was really angry at him telling me I had this thing. Um, but I think it's actually made me a bit stronger, knowing, learning all these things, and it's kind of made me try and look after myself a bit more because up until about a few years ago, I was really bad at it. I just would really push myself too hard and then wonder why I was essentially having a nervous breakdown. Um, but yeah, I suppose all those things growing up, middle child, getting that repetition from my parents. Oh, I don't talk about it that much because I don't think it's a big thing, but I'm blind in one eye as well, and I had something called congenital glaucoma when I was a baby, so they had to take my eye out when I was less than a year old. Then I had to go through several operations to have this prosthetic put in. It's great. I've grown up with it. To me, it's normal. But I was told by a counsellor that, that kind of trauma was the word he used, can sort of sink through your brain, even if you don't realize it. And people, when I was growing up, when they found out, they didn't always, but they tended to treat me a little differently at school. Um, and just, I know I'm off on a bit of a tangent here, but coming back to the Catholic school bit, um, I thought I was different because of the eye, and it was only after a few experiences with some teachers that I was different because I wasn't Catholic. And again, I know this is not true of all Catholic schools, but the Catholic school that I went to did make me feel very different, did make me feel very apart from the other children who were Catholic or came from good Catholic families. And I think that probably sank in a little bit too deeply, and it took me quite a few years to push away from that. And I have, which is good. But it all brought me up to now, and I started writing seriously when I was 26, and I've never really stopped. I've had a lot of trips along the way. I've had some successes too, and it is a continuing journey. I haven't finished yet, and I'm not. I'm always on my way to finding new places to go. And where do I want to be? Well, maybe we can get to that a bit longer. You've got a few questions, I know, and I've gone on for quite a bit, so I'm just going to take a sip of water.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. I have many questions actually. I would love to know, like being a middle child and being constantly told by, parents and family that you are the quiet one.
Hmm.
What, how did that impact you, like, in adult life?
Um, I that's a interesting question, and I think I've got a two-part answer to it as well. So it's impacted me in several ways. One way is there's still this voice at the back of my head that whenever I see my parents, I have an automatic reaction to fit this model that they want me to be in, which is John's the quiet one, he's the sensible one. Not that my sister and my brother aren't sensible, they are extraordinarily talented and sensible. But my parents, I think they tell us different things. They tell me these things. And it's almost like a challenge that I have to live up to every time I see them. So I sometimes feel I can't always be myself
Mm.
around them. So that's always lurking at the back of my head. And the other thing is, other people say this, you get people saying, oh, you're the middle child, and they say it with a funny, oh, you're the middle child, oh, that must mean you could be trouble, or you're not as good as your sister or your brother, which I have had from a few people in my career, which is weird. I don't know why they say it, but they have said it. So again, it's more expectations being subconsciously put into the back of my head. It doesn't make sense when I think about it logically, but it's always there, and it's influenced me. I think it's influenced me in a way that I feel like I've always got something to prove to myself more than anything, that I know these expectations were set down at a young age, and I've worked really hard to try and push my way beyond them and disprove them in a sense. And writing, it's been a really useful safety valve for me over the years. That's one reason I got into it. It's not the only reason. The main reason I write is because I really enjoy it, and it's fun making up stories. It's fun creating new worlds in your head, and it's kind of fun creating new characters, which usually are an amalgamation of real people I've met in my life. So, but yeah, it's always lurking in the back of my head there.
Yes, I'm actually little guilty because I guess, every time when I hear someone's a middle child, like, oh, because you hear all this thing, about being middle child, and I had a few friends who are in like middle child as well. So yeah, it's interesting how people just, hear, oh, you're a middle child, and you automatically think that you're the trouble one, or you're the like black sheep of the family, or you're
Yeah,
loud. It's really strange, but yeah.
yeah, it is odd. And sometimes, I'm not going to go into too much detail because it's not fair on the people that I'd be referencing, but I have had some people in my life, you know, flat out tell me, um, because of this, I felt bad, or because of who I am, they felt bad. That sounds very vague, but I've had people say that to me, and I don't think it's fair for me to go into too much detail because they're not here to respond. But I have had a lot of people at various stages in my family tell me, oh, because of who you are, you've made me feel bad, or you've made me feel this way. Not because of anything I've done, just because of the circumstances of me being that person, that middle child, or, the person with the, with the medical problems, or, I really don't like being the center of attention. And I do come from a background where everyone vies to be the center of attention. Like, it's quite loud sometimes, and I actually like to sit back and be a little bit quieter myself, mainly because it's too exhausting to be loud all the time. And I think that's something we're taught in our careers as well, that, oh, you've got to put yourself forward, you've got to be upfront and loud. And I realized what people actually mean is, they mean, well, yes, you've got to put your hand up and be noticed, but do it on your terms, be yourself. Because I think a lot of the toxic work cultures that we see today are a result of predominantly white, well, not just white men, all men, just being louder than everybody else and not knowing when to shut up and listen. And that's something I've been learning a lot the last 10 years, particularly as I moved into writing, that actually I learn more about people when I listen, and gently prod them with questions, as you're doing to me today. You're probably learning way more about me today than I've ever shared with a lot of people. So well done.
Thank you. Wow. That's so interesting because most people like to be the center of attention, and they like to talk about themselves.
Yeah.
And what I've been learning through doing my coaching training as well is, one of the top skills coaches need to have is active listening skills. And so I'm trying so hard here today with you, obviously. Well, I'm listening to you. I have so many questions I want to ask, but like,
Me
to
too.
but to be present with you today and just listening your journey, it's kind of really healing, actually. Just without any expectation, just listening to your journey. I find it's really healing. So
Oh,
yes, thank you for sharing that with me. and with the
That's quite a
listeners as
humbling
well.
thing to hear. That's quite a humbling thing to hear, Risa. Thank you for telling me that. I don't think it is. I don't think I is. I don't think I'm that inspiring. I don't think I'm that kind of person. But, if I can, if you're getting something out of me sharing this, great. Um, yeah, thank you.
Well, yeah, definitely. I'm sure, my listeners will, yeah, get inspired by your journey, and I'm sure they'll take away from something from this conversation. And my last question around your kind of childhood and as you were
Sure.
growing up, did you have any role models or like anyone that you used to look up to, like as you were growing up?
Yeah. I had there's a couple actually. I had to really think hard about this when you sent me the question, because at first I thought, oh God, do I have any role models? And then I realized, yeah, there's quite a few people. So I suppose the first one was probably my dad, because not in after I've just sat there and said, they put all these expectations on me without even meaning to, but I think you have to take into account I was born and all of a sudden I had to go into hospital so many times. And I can't imagine how horrifying that is for any parent, because I'm not a parent, but I can imagine how scary and traumatic that must be for them. But the one thing my dad's always done, which I'm forever grateful for, is basically told me from a very young age, and my mum did too, but I definitely got it more from my dad. Do you know what, son? As long as you work hard at whatever you want to do, you just do it. He said he didn't care what I ended up doing. He said, as long as I enjoy it and I work hard at it, he said that's all that matters really, because, we spend a lot of our lives working, yeah, for money, but hopefully doing things that we also enjoy too. And that really stuck with me, because the one thing I think I can safely say I'm very good at is putting in the work. Especially with writing, you have to put in the work, otherwise you just don't get better. It is almost like practicing the piano. If you don't practice the piano, you're just not going to get better. It's the same with writing. If you don't practice writing, it is a craft. And like any craft, you've got to put in the time, and you've got to listen to feedback, and you've got to go to classes sometimes to learn more and to learn things that you don't know yet. And you've got to read and all these other things. And that all comes from my dad, I guess. Also, I had a teacher, I remember, who was very encouraging with my stories when I was a kid, called Miss O'Sullivan. I don't know where she is now, but she was probably the only teacher I remember having at primary school who really encouraged me to, oh, this is, very creative, gave me books to read, suggested books that I might enjoy. So that was always really cool. Um, and I suppose recently there is one person above all who really does inspire me. And it's going to sound a bit corny, but that is my wife. She is one of the most intelligent people I've met in my life. She works very hard at what she does, but she's really efficient with her work. I've learned so much from her with regards to time management, to planning, to being more organized. Whereas, I used to be a bit crap at it, but I've listened to her and I've watched her as she's developed in her career and her life as well. And she just blows my mind the way she can crack through a lot of stuff, and the way she can talk to people and listen to people. I think one of the things that attracted me, one of the many things that attracted me to her, was the intelligence, but also the fact that she is a really good listener. And I think that's a super strength in any career, because if you by listening, you can end up getting people to reveal so much more. And, work is all about relationship building. And just the way she's able to listen, and because she gets the information from people very quickly, because she's very approachable, people tell her stuff that they probably wouldn't tell another manager. My wife's a director, a people director now at the British Society of Rheumatology. And she's got there pure, I think, hard work. She's really good at what she does. She's trained, but she listens. She is really good at listening, and it's just an underrated skill. And I've learned a lot from her on that as well.
Yes, yes.
Don't tell her I
Well,
said that, by the way. It will go to her head.
well, I have to say I love your wife, and I feel like you guys are a power couple, you know. Really,
Are you
yeah,
saying we're like the Obamas or something? We're not. But thanks.
um yeah, but I definitely like to interview your wife as well,
Yeah,
very soon. Because yeah, she's definitely someone that is really inspiring and inspiring for you as well. I'm sure
yeah,
she can inspire so many other people as well.
yeah, she does, I think.
So moving on to like now to your university time
Mm.
and how you started your career, I guess like
Mm.
your full-time job. Yeah, I would like for you to share a little bit about that as well.
Sure. God, well, I think coming back to what I mentioned earlier is I felt I had a love-hate relationship with school. I hope that came across quite clearly. So at the time, I was unsure on, I think I don't know anyone at 16 or 18 who knows what they want to do. If they do, I think they are in the minority, and very fortunate if you know from a very young age what you want to do. I didn't have a clue at that age. I was encouraged to apply for university because it looks good for the school. I remember that. My mum and dad did encourage me to apply as well. They said, no, you're bright enough, which was nice to hear. You should go for it. So I did. But the one thing about uni, that the best experience for me for uni was it just really brought me out of my shell. Like I would not say boo to a goose or a ghost or whatever that phrase is. I really wouldn't. I was very much quieter than I am now. Perhaps more typically introverted or what people expect an introvert to be. But uni really encouraged me to try new things, meet new people, talk to different people who come from different backgrounds. I think university's got a lot of stick in the press in recent years, and I think that is grossly unfair because it's not just about the degree. Certainly for me, it was not just about the degree. Yeah, I got the degree out of it, but I got the opportunity to learn more about myself, my life, and I learned how to be better at critical thinking, which is a skill that is so underrated in many jobs, and it doesn't matter what you're doing, critical thinking is really important for a healthy society. If you can't, if you just when you look at politics today, I think the situation we're in at the moment is a result of not enough critical thinking, not enough challenge, and not enough questioning from all of us on what the hell is going on. Why is this happening whenever it comes to climate, to money, to energy, to all the things that we're all worried about right now, racism, sexism, you name it. That's a lack of it's there. Critical thinking is there, but it's almost been seen as a dirty word. Um, Sorry, I'm going off a bit of a tangent here, so I apologise. So uni for me was really good from that perspective, but I didn't know what I wanted to do then. The best thing I got out of uni was the things that I just mentioned. What it didn't do, unfortunately, was prepare me for the world of work. And I think that's maybe something that I hope it's better at now because we're talking 20 plus years ago when I was at university, but at the time I didn't feel I was fully prepared for what the world of work would be. I was basically led to believe, oh, you've got a degree now, you'll fly into an amazing high-powered job, and that's just not how it works. That's not how the world works. Um, I left uni, and for the first 2 years, I sank what I now know was a very deep depressive period between 2001 and 2003. I struggled to get a job. My confidence went low because I'd gone from living in halls at university to going home, essentially, to back to living with your parents because you don't have any money until you get a job. And between 2001 and 2003, I did some temping. I worked I had my job at Sainsbury's, which I stupidly quit sooner than I should have, because that would have at least given me more money coming in. And it was awful, and I didn't know how to. There's a couple of close friends of mine who know that I was depressed, and that they know me quite well. But at the time we didn't have the language to call it that. We didn't know how to express it properly. And I remember one friend telling me in a pub one night, "Oh, you need to get a job. You just basically need to get a job and sort yourself out." And I'm forever grateful for him for saying that. John, if you're listening, it's you. But I am forever grateful for him saying that, because I didn't know what I was doing. So I just went and got a job, any job. I ended up working at HMV for quite a while, and that was fun because I got DVDs and discounts. But then, you know, I lost the temp contract, came to an end, and I did get into another funk. And trigger warning for listeners, I did self-harm. I ended up punching walls and stuff and scraping the skin off my knuckles because it was the only way I could feel something, which was weird. And that's a whole separate discussion that you can talk to a counselor for years about. But I understand now why I was doing it, but it was really bad, and I didn't know what it was. And then it was May 2003. I'd applied for a management trainee scheme with Odeon Cinemas, and I was accepted. I went through like 3 rounds of interviews, and that was like a massive switch in my career direction. I'd always loved cinema. I was the president of the Cinema Society in my third year at uni. I love movies, and this seemed like a really fun way to kind of get into the exhibition area of the business. And it was really fun. I learned so much when I was there. Actually, another role model, I suppose, for me was the manager who trained me at Odeon, and that's George Ray, who now works for a hospice charity, I think. And he is one of the best people managers I've ever worked with in my life. He took this really naive young 23-year-old Wally and basically turned me into what I now know as a really good manager and a really good business manager as well. Because back then we didn't just do the front of house, we did everything. So that was accounting, that was payroll, that was checking your trading accounts, learning what all the figures meant, learning how to leverage your retail sales to make more money for the business, doing premieres, organizing events, going to exhibitor events, meeting new people. He taught me how to do that, how to do it professionally, how to engage professionally, stuff that I just didn't really get at uni. I got critical thinking at uni, but I didn't get any of the sort of soft skills that you need for life on how to operate, essentially. So that was fantastic. I worked really hard. I did a break in 2005 to bum around traveling because I'd never did it when I came out of uni. So I went off to Canada and the States. I'd saved up money to do it, really enjoyed it. Did run into a grizzly bear at one point and survived because it was on the other side of a bridge and it walked away. So I was very lucky. But I loved all of that. Then I came back in 2006. I did another couple of temp jobs, was in a bit of a funk. Then I went back to Odeon, and I worked there between 2007 to 2011, worked my way up to general manager. And then in 2011, this was the real turning point for me, which I know was another thing you wanted to get me to think about, is the company went through a major transition. I was still writing in the back of all this, by the way, but I hadn't taken it seriously. But in 2011, two things happened. I got out of a very toxic relationship that was just awful for both of us. It was just wrong for both of us, and I'm glad we ended it. And I had to tell my team at Swiss Cottage, which is where I was at the time, that we were all being redeployed or made redundant because the company was repositioning itself. They had a new structure and a way of working, and I took it really badly because I felt like it was a personal attack on my ability as a manager. It wasn't, but it felt that way to me. Plus, I'd seen my former mentor who trained me essentially leave the business the year before. I saw loads of my colleagues had left the business, and it just didn't feel like home as a career for me anymore. So I quit. sorry, I got out of a toxic relationship. 2 months later, I quit my job. I ended up working for a few months at one of the dodgiest companies I've ever worked with in my life. I won't go into too much details because I wouldn't want to get myself into trouble, but it was horrible. The culture was horrible. The managing director who I was reporting directly to was abysmal. I was miserable, and I left in June 2011, and I reached out to a mutual friend we both know, um, who to see if I could do any blogging and writing for his marketing company. And that's how my career trajectory completely changed. Like I did a full pivot from being this quite, well, I'm told, very successful manager and business manager for Odeon. I'd actually worked as an HR assistant and an HR advisor in between as well. So I'd got the HR background. And then I suddenly thinking, oh no, I don't want to do that anymore. It's just not for me. I need to change everything. So I did two of the most, what do they call it now? Two of the most traumatic life changes, like getting out of a relationship, or, and changing your job, but not just changing your job, changing your career trajectory completely. And yeah, it's terrifying because I had no experience professionally writing. I'd done my own stories and I'd submitted some stuff, but nothing had ever come of it. And all of a sudden, here I am doing something I'd never really taken seriously before for the first time. And that it was a pivot. And thank God to my friend for giving me that opportunity to start doing it. Was, it was SEO writing, but I was learning a lot about SEO. I was learning a lot about digital content, but I was also doing fiction writing at the same time. So it really gave me a drive to keep pushing and keep going. And it gave me a lot of confidence that I had lost throughout that bad relationship and the sort of degradation of the job that I was in before. So if I could give any advice to anyone listening at the moment, is if you're not happy in your job, don't just sit there and let it happen. Do try and talk to someone about it. But we can talk about that maybe towards the end. But that's what changed, and I've kept going ever since then. And I've had ups and downs, but I haven't stopped. I will not stop. I'm like perpetual motion machine at the moment. So, or like the Terminator of writing. I don't know, but it's something that I think it would be a betrayal of my brain if I just gave it up, because now that I am getting success, it shows that the hard work is beginning to pay off. It takes time, but it's working. It's hard, but I am enjoying it.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that journey. Yeah, that was a great advice. I've been in a job that I didn't enjoy, few jobs in the past. And yeah, talking to someone really help, even, they might not be able to do something, to give me a new job, or, maybe introduce to somebody that might need someone, on a job or anything. But yeah, just talking to someone really helps.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a great advice. So, okay, so you worked in Odeon, and
Yeah.
then you went traveling for a year, did you say? For
About 4 or 5 months all
4 or 5
in.
months.
Yeah,
Okay. And then you came back and you
I did.
you didn't stay and traveling for the
Ran
rest
out
of
of
the life.
money.
So did you actually leave your job at
I
Odeon?
did. I
Okay.
did. Yeah, I left it in 2005. And then, if we're going to go for full disclosure, between 2000 and sort of end of 2005, mid 2006, I was working for the Gambling Commission as a junior HR advisor. I got that role from another person who I could probably cite as a mentor. She taught me a lot about people management as well as George. Her name's Alison Loftin, and she is now a global. God, I can't remember her full job title, but she's a global talent acquisition or HR director in Malaysia. She lives over in Malaysia at the moment. But she's another person who really helped me develop as a people manager. Uh, Got me working on processes as well, just helping me develop the soft skills that I needed and toning down some of my rough edges as well, because I think she did, both her and George really did save my arse on quite a few occasions when I could have got into a lot of trouble. So I'm really grateful that they had the patience and the, I don't know, the tenacity to steer me through those difficult times. So I did that, but at the same time, and I didn't realize it at the time, but I was again in a depressive funk. I'd done traveling, I had these amazing experiences. I'd come home again to a bit of a bump. It was a bit like coming back from university and, oh, I'm back to normal again. It's back to the day-to-day drudgery. And that took me another 6 months to pull myself out of. And again, I didn't have the language for it at the time. I didn't know that that's what it was because no one told me. No one had ever spoken to me about these things. And growing up, we would never talk about mental health. It just wasn't the thing. It was like, oh, they're not feeling very well, or but you never knew. So I realized I was in a bad way at the end of 2006, and I reached out to George, my former manager at Odeon Kensington at the time, and he was still with the company. And I said, look, I'm in a really bad way. I don't feel great. I remember sending him this email, which probably sounded awful from his perspective, but yeah, he said he was absolutely amazing because he just found me. He got me a position back in the company to help him with a new cinema that he'd been given in Whiteley's, which was in Bayswater in London. So that's how I got back in. And then over the next 6 months, I had the opportunity to push myself again, develop, help other managers. And then I was offered a senior manager position at Odeon Uxbridge on the sort of northwest outer edge of London, with a totally different style of management. But she was also really good, and she really helped me learn new things about the business. From there, I basically just worked my way up to becoming a general manager, which is when you have total business and site control of a cinema. And I got that in 2008, working at Swiss Cottage. And then I was there until I left in 2011, when I did that pivot to become a writer, or try to become a writer.
Yes. So now, yeah, I would like to hear more about how you pivoted into writing and how all this experience working with supportive managers and yourself developing that kind of people management skills and gaining that experience, how did that influence you becoming a writer and pivoting to that direction?
All that. I don't think you'll meet any writer who won't say that. I don't think you'll meet any writer who will say that, oh, I just decided I wanted to be one day. I think they are very rare. I know there are some people who do sit there and say, oh, yeah, I always knew I wanted to be a writer. All the writers I've met, it's come from similar experiences to mine. It's come from, well, I've been doing this job, I've tried this, I've tried that, I've done this, I've done that. You've got writers out there who have been doctors, psychologists, business managers, finance managers, entrepreneurs, yoga teachers, all sorts of different backgrounds from all sorts of different cultural backgrounds as well. I mean, I think all those experiences, if I hadn't have had them, I don't think I would be as good a writer as I am now. And I know I'm still not the best I can be, but I think I kind of had to go through all of that to get to where I am. It almost sounds accidental, but maybe it wasn't, because I always knew I wanted to tell stories, but I just didn't know how to put myself in a position where I might actually get paid to tell stories, or someone might want to publish something I'd written. Interestingly, money's not a huge motivator for me when it comes to this. My opinion is, as long as I've got enough to live on comfortably, wherever possible. I mean, that's becoming increasingly hard in our current economic climate, but the goal is not money. The goal is to share my stories, to have other people read them, to share my perspective on the world, because I think I have something to say. I've got lots of things to say, as it turns out. But and writing is that wouldn't have happened if I hadn't have gone through my university, my growing up, university, going to Odeon, going traveling, coming back, going back into Odeon, coming out of Odeon. Even, the relationships, good and bad, that I've had, they've all influenced everything I write. Um, because writing, you can't do it in isolation. Writing is about people. Like I've spoken to many people who think we just sit behind our keyboards all day. Yes, we do that too. But what do we write about? Yes, we can read, but we also have to go and speak with people to learn stuff about the world. We have to listen to radio. We have to go out and see our friends and family. We have to go and do other jobs because the average income of a UK writer, if you're just doing writing, is about £12,500 a year. You can't live on that. So you do have to do other jobs a lot of the time to supplement your income. And you do things like podcasts, you do speaking events, you go to conventions. It's not just about writing, it is about people. But again, I wouldn't have been there if I hadn't have gone through all those other experiences. They've heavily influenced me. I don't think I'd be doing this if I hadn't done all that stuff first.
So you mentioned that you can live just being a writer, and I know you've had several jobs, and you have that currently, but you did some other jobs previously as well. So
Yep.
I would like to hear that as well.
Well, I'm currently I'm on a contract helping the NHS England. So I'm on a fixed term contract with them part time to help them clean up mostly the website, because the NHS has been under immense pressure, well, forever, but definitely over the last 3 years. And I saw an opportunity come up earlier this year to try. They needed content officers to help them clean it up. So I'm doing that at the moment alongside the freelance work that I'm doing. I do regular freelancing for a mental health company as well. Mental health, that's another thing that, because of the things that I've learned about myself, has become very important to me when I've realized how many other people are living and struggling with poor mental health on a day-to-day basis, and how critical, I use that word very carefully, but how critical it is to talk about it. Because especially now, we're in a situation where if you're not talking about it, you're going to get ill. You're just going to make yourself unwell. So I volunteer in the sector still. I've worked with Mind, I've worked with Samaritans, I've worked on a campaign called Time to Change, which sadly closed during the pandemic, 2021, I think it closed its doors last year. But that was a campaign to end mental health stigma and discrimination. And I got into all of that stuff because I had a breakdown. All the pressure I was putting on myself to be a better writer, to achieve, to go further and further. Sometimes it's just too much putting that on your own head. And I had a complete breakdown in 2014, which prompted another career change, because at the time I was working as an optician, helping run a home care business, and I had to get out. I remember I was trying to write, I was trying to help run that business. I was trying to do too many things, pay my rent as well, because living in London, I don't anymore, but living in London has never been cheap. And it all just got too much. And I remember sitting in front of my computer one day, I was trying to do some logistical planning for home visits. I couldn't see anything on the screen. And I thought, oh God, there's something wrong with my eye. And me being blind in one eye, I was really paranoid, because I thought, crap, has something gone wrong? Have I got some kind of disease? Have I got glaucoma in the good eye again? And no, it wasn't my eyesight at all. My brain had literally done this weird thing, I was later told by a doctor and a counsellor, where it's just, when there's a point your mind gets to where it physically cannot cope with processing information, and it comes about from mental exhaustion. They call it mental health crisis now. In layman's terms, it used to be called a nervous breakdown, and I was in the middle of one, and I didn't know it. So I trotted off to it was actually a local mind I trotted off to say help, because I couldn't get an appointment at the time with my GP. I did get an appointment with my GP eventually, um, and started doing counselling on a weekly basis, because I needed to be able to talk these things through and try and figure out what on earth was going on in my brain, and why is it suddenly betraying me, and why is it collapsing. Those sessions were really useful for my writing and for my jobs as well, because they kept me functioning. I I would encourage anyone who's sitting here maybe listening to this and thinking, oh God, I can't do that. I can't admit I've got a problem, because it still happens. I know we're talking about it more, but it still happens. Don't try not to. I know it's can feel embarrassing, but it's quite common. Like 1 in 4 people every year are living with a mental health problem. It's sad to say, it's pretty normal. But it's really, really important that you go and see someone, even if you just go and talk to a friend about how you're feeling, or your partner, or anyone you trust, reach out. It's worth having a chat. For me, I had to do that in my head. I know I wasn't functioning properly. In the back of my head, I knew, so I need to do something. So I went to get help. And if I hadn't have done that, again, I don't think I would still be standing here talking about this and still writing and still pushing myself forward, because it was awful. I cannot underscore enough and how terrible I felt, like physically sick, um, scared to get up, scared to go out the door, because you're afraid something bad's going to happen to you. And just the eyesight thing alone really frightened me. That was the push that made me go and seek some support, because I was terrified I was going blind, and then worrying about what my friends and family might think. And as it turns out, by the way, I've got really lovely friends, and my family are mostly really supportive. So don't underestimate the people closest around you. 9 times out of 10, if they're your friends, they know you very well, they're gonna help you. Even if they don't understand it fully, they're gonna be able to listen. They're gonna be able to, give you a little bit of mental support, because they're your friends. But I didn't know that at the time, because when you're in the middle of a crisis, you're not thinking straight. You can't. But I knew enough. I was lucky. I knew enough that to know, shit, I need help. This is not good. And that's ironically, that's what pushed me into the mental health sector, because I was like, well, God, if I'm feeling this way, how many other people might be feeling this way? How many other guys might feel this way? Because traditionally in this country, and perhaps globally as well, men don't really would talk not to talk about how they're feeling, and share their feelings about work and life and things they're worried about. And yet we all have them. Uh, just listening to myself say it sounds insane not to talk about it, because it's critical to talk about it. People die if they don't talk about it, and that's horrific, because that should never happen. And so from there, I got into counselling. A couple of years later, after I'd managed to get myself out of the business, I started working. I really pushed myself into writing heavily for 6 months. I self-published a career change book, which I'm happy to share the link to, for anyone who's interested. It needs updating, because a lot has happened since then, but it's there. I've built a website. I got back. I started learning more about digital content management. I ended up getting a job with Mind, working on the Time to Change campaign. And I did that for 2 years all in. And this was all at the same time as continuing to write and continuing to freelance and continuing to submit stuff, push stuff, go to conventions and speak to people. And but that wouldn't have happened if I hadn't have sought help. I wouldn't be able to work. And that's the other thing I would encourage anyone listening. If you're wanting to do your job, if you're wanting to have a career, and if you're wanting to change career, it's always worth speaking to someone, and just asking for advice, whether it's professional or personal, doesn't matter. But You don't have to do it all by yourself. You can talk to someone, even if it's just a mate or a colleague or your partner or anyone you trust, really. And never rule out counselling as well. I I went through one, two, three, four counsellors before I found someone that I felt I could talk to, because you're essentially talking to a stranger, which on the one hand is easier than talking to a friend because there's no expectation. The stranger doesn't know you, so you feel in on the one hand you can say more, but on the other hand you're talking to a stranger, so you're very suspicious of them and like, who the hell are you? You know, it turns out they're a qualified professional and they're trained to deal with these kinds of problems, so it's fine. But sometimes it can take you a couple of goes to find that person that you think you can click with. I would always encourage anyone, don't give up. Keep trying, because you will find someone. Anything that helps you develop in your career, especially if you're looking to change, you know, don't ever rule out a professional coaching or counseling service, because they can really, really help. They help me.
Yes, I am so glad that you did seek for support. Okay, so John, I've got final couple of questions for
Go for
you.
it.
So what's the best advice you have ever received?
Be kinder to yourself. I've had that from my wife. I've had that from friends. I've had that from colleagues. I've had that from virtually everyone who's spoken to me in the past, especially in the last few years. Be kinder to yourself. Um, I think we all get told you must do this, you must do that, and we all have the terrible we all fall into this terrible trap of comparison to how we perceive other people are doing. And I think social media is very unhealthy, or I think the way we use social media can be very unhealthy. I'll correct that, because it's very easy to look at someone tweeting forever, or on LinkedIn or on Facebook or bloody whatever you're using, Instagram, and think, oh God, they seem to be doing so well. They seem to be doing so much more. Oh my God, they've done like 3 blogs in one day. Oh my God, it's a trap. It's the worst thing you can do, is to compare yourself to other people. So the best advice I ever received is just be kinder to yourself. You're not other people, you're you. Focus on what you're doing. Focus on what you're trying to do. You know, it's almost like putting some blockers on and keeping your head down. It's okay to be aware of things that are going on, but you do have to pull yourself out of it. And one way I do to do that is I put my phone in another room. If I need to focus and I need to concentrate, I know what will happen if I leave my phone by my desk. I'm just going to start scrolling. I'm going to go on LinkedIn, or I'm going to go on WhatsApp, or I'm going to go on my Gmail, and I'm going to start scrolling through emails and blah blah blah. And before I know it, 2 hours have gone by. So to be kinder to myself and my career, I've just put my phone in the other room now, or I turn it off. Like, I manage social media on my own terms now. Like, I know I can only do about 10 minutes in the morning, maybe 10 minutes in the afternoon. If I try and do more than that, I'll lose a whole day. But be kinder to yourself. Best advice I ever got given.
Such a great advice.
Yeah,
Yeah, I really need to follow your advice.
so do
Of
I.
Okay, and final question. What advice would you give to those who are trying to follow their passions but feeling challenged to do so?
Sure. I actually did a bullet point list for this, you'll be pleased to know. So, number one, repeating myself, be kind to yourself. You know, you're embarking on something that it can be really challenging. It's exciting, but it's really challenging, and you do not underestimate the mental toll it can take on you and the people who care about you. So be kind to yourself, and because that's being kinder to the people around you. You need to look after yourself before you can look after anyone else. That's the first rule of first aid. Make sure you're okay before you start helping someone else. So look after yourself. Um, Next one I really thought hard about, but I think it's true. Be yourself, be authentic. I think authenticity is critical to success, and I'm learning that. I learned that the hard way. But actually, the more authentic I am in my career, in who I am, and being honest with people about my own expectations of whatever job I'm doing in, setting them or receiving expectations, being myself has really helped with that. And that doesn't mean taking in all your baggage from home. That just means, being comfortable with who you are as a person at home, at work, in whatever environment you find yourself in. It will shine through. Um, the next one I find, this is my challenge because I am really introverted, believe it or not. Put yourself out there a little bit. And what I mean by that is there are things you can learn and do as you're developing courses, training, networking. Meetup is really good for networking. I know if you're running a meetup, it can be expensive, but Meetup as a site, if you have trouble on social media like Facebook in general, which can be good but can be bad, Meetup's really good for local networking, national networking, international networking. You can find all sorts of groups there, and that will help encourage you to put yourself in the right positions for opportunities in the future. So, go be brave, go to conventions, go to meetings, even if you feel, I'm not sure I'll be good at this. Just go anyway. What's the worst thing that can happen? Nothing. You start with nothing. You might leave with nothing, but at least you've given it a go. Um, don't try and be something you're not. And this is really hard for people not to do, but try not to copy what everyone else is doing. One of the biggest mistakes I made early in my career in writing and my other careers is literally trying to copy beat for beat what other people were doing. It doesn't work. And that it comes back to being authentic to who you are as well in any job. If you're just copying what someone else is doing, people will see through it pretty quickly. They won't believe you. They won't get it. So trust yourself, be who you are, but don't copy exactly what other people do. You can learn from other people and you can take away the bits and pieces that you think will help you, but don't just do like for like. Don't Try not to copy. I would say remember that being scared is pretty normal. Whenever you're trying to do something new, it can be frightening. It can be terrifying. That's normal, and it will help you to be braver. It's what you do with that fear that I think counts. It's like I've been terrified more times in my life than I can count, and sometimes I've succumbed to that fear. But as I've got more experience and I'm getting older, I'm beginning to learn is actually fear can be really useful. I can use it as a tool. So if I'm scared, I can begin to almost analyze it and say, oh, okay, well, why am I scared? And then I can distance myself and logically think about, well, what's the worst that can happen in this situation? And for me, it's being in a huge networking event. For anyone listening, I loathe networking. I think it is like an activity sent by the devil to introverts to really make us feel horrible. I don't like it, but I can do it. And to do that, it's basically just remembering everyone in that room that you're in or online, whichever way you're doing it, is probably in the same mental position that you are, as in they're thinking, oh God, I hate this. This is going to be awful, blah, blah. There's not many people who I think actively enjoy networking. I know some who are very good at it, but even they've told me, oh God, it's really exhausting. I really don't like that. But it's okay. They still went, and you can too. It's and sometimes, I've made friends from unexpected networking, I'll call it, networking events that feel more relaxed. Yeah, and my final bit of advice, I suppose, is it ties back to putting yourself out there, is put yourself in positions that are interesting to you and to what you want. Don't just pick random stuff that you think, oh, yeah, I'll go to this. Like, don't just go to a networking event because it's a networking event. Actually look at what you want to achieve. Ask yourself, well, what do I want to get out of this networking event? How will this help me develop my career further? Is this an area or topic that I'm interested in or will help me progress? If the answer to all of those questions is no, don't go, don't do it. Find stuff that you're interested in, and work up from there, because then it makes everything else that comes after much easier to do.
Thank you. That's such a great advice, list of great advice you got there. I have to type that out and put it on the website where I'm gonna post this podcast episode.
Heavily edited podcast episodes.
Wow, thank you so much, John, for having this conversation with me today and sharing your journey. If anyone wants to get in touch with you, where can people go to?
So you can find me on my website, that is johnallenwriter.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn. I cannot remember my LinkedIn handle, but if you type in John Allen award-winning writer, because I am now, I should pop up. You can also find me on Twitter. My handle is @theonlyjohnnya. And where else can you find me? Those are my three main sources of communication. My website's the best place to go, johnallenwriter.com. I'd say then go to Twitter and LinkedIn. So Twitter @theonlyjohnnya, LinkedIn, just put in John Allen award-winning writer and I should come up.
Amazing. I'll put those links in a show note as well.
No problem. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's been really
Thank
fun. I know I waffle a lot, so feel free to edit it all.
I hope you enjoyed listening to my conversation with John. I felt a little emotional listening to his journey, but at the same time, it was really healing for me as well. I'm so proud to be able to call John my friend and really grateful for him to be so open to sharing his journey with us. I hope you have a wonderful day and I'll see you in the next episode.